Hello, welcome to episode 40 of live.withcode.uk. This week we're continuing the theme of being able to read from a file, and we're working on a chocolate chip cookie recipe today. So one of the challenges is to try out this recipe. If anyone wants to bring them into school so that I can taste test them, I'm not sure if COVID rules allow me to do that, but so you should probably try them out yourself at home. So this is what we're aiming for. One thing that irritates me in a recipe is it always says this recipe makes 12 and you can adjust it to make double and eat twice as much, or reduce it if you only want to make a few and you haven't got enough ingredients. This program says if you want to make 100 cookies, it will adjust the recipe for you and it will guide you through step by step. So let's see, how much do we need just to make 10 cookies? And it shows you all the recipes that we need. We're going to read from two files. We have a CSV file, a comma separated value file that contains all of the ingredients, how much we need, and the units. And we display those on screen nicely, having adjusted these. And then we've got the recipe. So it just has each instruction on a separate line. And the recipe that I've gone for here, I haven't tried this out, so I don't know if it's any good or not. This is from BBC Good Food. So very interested in your reviews. My wife has an awesome recipe for chocolate chip cookies, but it's a trade secret. I'm not allowed to share it. So let's get started. First of all, I won't make you type out this recipe. You can try it with a different recipe if you want, but we want a program that can read this information in and display it on screen. So let's first of all display a little welcome message. So something like chocolate chip recipe or chocolate cookie recipe. I guess if you wanted to, you could read that from a file as well, so that it's not always going to be chocolate chip cookies. So we've got kind of a main menu. Then I'd like to be able to load in each step of the instructions, because that's a little bit easier. We just want to show each line one by one. So to open a file, we use the open built-in function. We need to know the file name. So this is recipe.txt. Recipe.txt. We need to store that as a file object and remember to close it afterwards. We haven't specified whether we're reading or writing to it. We don't need to write to the file, so we'll just leave it in read mode. And then read from that file. If we read, we need to save it. So let's call that, I don't know, instructions or recipe. And then we should be able to display that whole recipe. But it would be great if we could do that line by line rather than just the whole thing, to keep it really simple, step-by-step instructions, just like we've got algorithms in code. But this is an algorithm to make a chocolate chip cookie. So once we've read it, we can break that down, we can decompose it, split it up into smaller chunks. So we have ingredients equals recipe.split, and we want to split it every time we come across a new line. This means we're going to have a list of all of those lines separately. Why is that useful? Well, we can now display them one by one. So instead of displaying the whole thing, we can go for maybe step in. Oh no, they're not ingredients, are they? They're steps, stages, instructions. Instructions would be better. So there we've got a list of instructions, and for each step in our list of instructions, we can display that step. So again, it looks like we're just displaying the whole thing, but if we use the built-in input function, then it will display it and then wait. I don't really want that. I want it to just display it and then a separate input afterwards. So let's print it and then use input without a prompt. There we go, that's better. So that's our first instruction. Press enter when you're done and you can get through each instruction. Fab. You can change it with your own recipe. If you put any instructions in here, it will just load it from the file and it should work. So this sounds like something that could be quite useful. We'll reuse this. So let's say we're going to define a procedure, something that we might want to use a little bit later. Something like read the instructions. And it might be helpful to know which file we're reading from. And then all of this becomes part of that procedure. And we want to use that parameter in here. So let's cut that, Control and X, plop it down there. So it doesn't seem to do anything at the moment other than display the main menu starter thing here. We've defined this procedure, but we haven't actually called it yet. We haven't said, go ahead and actually do it. Read instructions. So let's call it with that parameter value here, the argument recipe.txt, and then it actually works. By convention, it's good to put your procedure definitions and your function definitions at the top of the program, just underneath any imports. So let's put in here subprograms. Remember, a subprogram is either a function or a definition. And then we've got the main program in here. Great. Okay, so we can read all the instructions, we can display the instructions. My next subprogram is going to be to load all of these instructions and then display them all. So let's see, load ingredients this time. And this time I want to know which file we're reading from. I want to know how many the recipe is supposed to cater for. So this recipe, I think, says it makes, is it 25? I should say somewhere. I'm pretty sure it makes 25 cookies. They're probably going to be tiny, but apparently it makes 25. So let's say quantity original and quantity wanted. Okay, so how do we load all of that data in? Well, we still need to read from a file, so we're going to open from that file. So this is a parameter here. That parameter could be anything that we like. We pass in a value when we call it. Then we need to remember to close that file. We need to read all of the data from it and store that somewhere. So let's say file contents. Then, just like we did before, we need to break it down line by line. So let's say file contents.split. Every time we get a new line, we want to treat that differently. So let's say lines. This is now going to be a list that that stores each of these lines separately. And then we can loop through them. For line singular in lines plural. So this is a list containing all of them. This is just going to be one single string. Then we want to split them up into columns, as in that's the first column, that's the second column, that's the third column. And the columns, the values are separated by commas. So let's see, columns equals line singular, just the individual line we're looking at. And we're going to split that this time, not on a new line constant, but on a comma, because there's a comma between each value that we want. Then we should be able to get the values that we want. So butter value unit, let's say ingredient is equal to the first value, and then we can have what was the next one? The quantity and then the unit. Great. Okay, so quantity and then the unit. So this is using list indexing. That's the first value, second value, third value. And then we'll just display it for now. We won't worry about scaling it up or changing it. We can do that later. Let's just display it using some string formatting. So let's make it look like a bullet point with a star in there. I'd like to say the number, the unit, and then a space, and then the actual thing that we want. So it's going to be the number first, so that's going to be the quantity. Then it's in this mustache bracket set thing, that's going to be the unit, as in 25 grams. And then we need to know what it's 25 grams of, or however much we want. So this is going to be the ingredient. Okay, so it never actually shows the ingredients yet, because although we've defined this subprogram, we've never called it. Right, so let's call that down here. I'm going to do that before the instructions. So let's load the ingredients. And we need to pass these parameters in. So this time we're going to load from ingredients.csv. It's designed for 25 cookies, but for now I'm just going to say 10. Okay, so at the moment it does display them all, it reads them all, but it doesn't scale them. It's just the original values that we've got, 225 grams, whereas it should be slightly different. So how can we do that? Well, the quantity needs changing. So the quantity is a numerical value, so it's presumably going to be an integer, but it could potentially be like half an egg or half a tablespoon or something. So we'll go for a floating point, a real value. And then we're going to need to change it. Quantity equals what it was divided by the original to get the amount that you need to make one chocolate chip cookie, multiplied by the number of cookies that we want to make. So let's see, that should be how much you need now to make 10 cookies. Does that look about right? Just less than half? Yeah, that looks okay. So now we're going to make it so that it asks you how many cookies you want to make. So let's see, input, how many cookies would you like to bake? And if you ask a question, we should remember the answer. Let's call it quantity. Now this is a global variable, completely different to this one in here. This is a local variable that exists only in this subprogram, and it's fine to use the same names because they're completely separate variables. So this is presumably going to be an integer, and then we can pass it in here. All right, let's try. How many cookies? So let's try it with the original amount. Great. Let's try it again with 100 cookies. And let's see what we need for just one cookie. So I don't really want like 0.4 of a gram. That's not going to be easy to measure. So that's first value in here. Let's just say, right, to no decimal places. Let's try that. So 1, there we go. So rounded to no decimal places. Okay, I think we're there. We've just got a couple of challenges for you to be able to work through. So let's have a look. Challenge 1, the tastiest one, just try it. I haven't tested this recipe yet, but see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you think it needs more chocolate, then adjust your recipe. Just put more chocolate in here so that you can remember that for next time. Second challenge, you can check out the original recipe and see the secret ingredient. So I'll put a link to the original recipe up here. Go to that link and you'll see the original recipe has like a bonus ingredient in there. Bit controversial. I'm not sure if it would make it nicer or not so nice. You can try it and see. And then add it to your list of ingredients and see if your program still works. And then finally, make it so that you can choose which which recipes to load. So you can make your own files and then make it ask you a question. Do you want to make cookies? Do you want to make, I don't know, a pie? And it should work scaling the values for any recipe. All right, be interested to find out how you get on. All the very best. See you next week.